child. You cannot save him from the fire. He will burn.
Hello everyone, Skippy here, and welcome to One Piece episode 972, directed by Ryosuke Tanaka from Ayakomaki's board and supervised by Tu Yong-ce. After last week was as good as it was, I'm very much looking forward to what this all-star episode has to offer, as Tu Yong-ce finally gets not only his second episode to fully supervise on his own, but he's also buoyed by an exceptionally solid directorial staff in form of extremely promising assistant director Ryosuke Tanaka, who will be directing from a board done by former co-series director Ayakomaki, who I didn't think we'd see anything from for a long while. With what already looks to be an amazing episode with what little we can see in the preview, being chock full of polished art, buttery smooth animation all around, and wonderful looking direction, I'm ready to go in head first to get the full picture and see just what this episode is really all about. With massive extensions to the manga in tow that will no doubt help it even be more action-packed than the source, will episode 972 amaze in ways that only the main staff of it could pull off? Let's check back into the brawl and find out. This episode covers the remaining pages of chapter 970 and the first 4 pages of chapter 971, and pretty much goes through the same motions as the original chapter, but with tons and tons more added action. That helps really build an actual fight out of what was simply just a time-lapse in the manga, giving us some great moments with both Oden and the 9 red scabbards and their few allies. Nothing is really massively altered from the eventual outcome of it all, and none of the action feels massively out of place, and it all fits the scope of the type of large-scale battle that it's supposed to be pretty well, effectively going a long way to really get you invested in it even if you know the end of it. Combine that with a few brief but still powerful all the same added cutaways to Toki and the children that are short enough to not feel like they blue ball the viewer, and the adaptation brought to the table here truly makes this fight a hell of a lot more grandiose compared to what Oda did with it, and I think that helps it piggyback directly off of last episode to actually make this a much more powerful and meaningful moment at its core. I do think Tanaka's OST choices could have been a bit better in hindsight, because I think playing the very strongest twice in the same episode is a bit overkill. But that doesn't distract from the rather monumental adaptation effort that surrounds it, which is complemented by a crazy good storyboard and the insane execution of it. Even when knowing the storyboard is going to be her last on the series for quite some time, it still feels like Komaki truly never left with this one, bringing forward her insanely creative talent at making sturdy and well done compositions, with quite a bit of added flair to make the stuff like crowd shots a bit less boring, as well as her wonderful sense of scale and scope of everything that really portrays the fight in the intense way that it should be viewed in. It is sad that we don't see a few of her trademarks like the stylish name cards on board here, but the overall premium nature of the storyboard makes it an entire non-issue, and especially with what Tanaka does to it, using his blossoming yet still experienced directorial skills to heighten the scale and overall polish of shots in every which way with lighting and his own layout corrections, also dousing it all in lovely and appropriate compositing that helps the episode have its own distinct look, taking the chance to experiment with the most minute areas in this episode that absolutely goes a long way in making it look extra pretty. It's just a perfect mixture of the idiosyncrasies of two of the strongest and most talented staff members that the series and Wano has ever seen. And that makes for a rock solid storyboard all around that allows the animators a lot of room to play in. Tu Yong-ce stated on Twitter a bit ago that he's amassed quite the team for this episode as far as animators go, and whoo boy did he really bring the heat. As aside from his own visceral key animation that holds so much snappy power and smoothness whenever it's on screen, and his supervision work as animation supervisor for the second time, which is by far his best, since he's going absolutely all out with the thick line work and crazy expressions and shading, everybody that he brought on board helped follow him up with some insanely impressive work of their own. With several of Chu's friends like like Jun Won-tan making an appearance and absolutely producing what might just be their best work to date, bar none, but there's also some surprise guest appearances as well from people like Hwang Shin-shi, who some may know from Boruto, who himself delivers an incredibly smooth and finessed scene of their own with the scabbards versus both king and queen that, like Oba's Inu scene from last episode, just feels so new even for Wano. However, that all doesn't even begin to describe the extent of the work done by those on the Japanese and online side of things either, as webgen animator Verkreek, who particularly blew up on Jujutsu Kaisen recently, delivers a pretty weighty and almost lifelike scene of Oden running towards Kaido and the two clashing for a bit. That still harbors his idiosyncratic line work and movement in places, but quite like last episode in its own webgen animation, was extremely rough in the layout phase, so the second key animators who worked on the scene, such as my friend Jackie Swaki, deserve just as much praise as Verkreek for this scene, as they were the ones who really finished it and made it truly what it is. And immediately following that up is a recognizable shading heavy cut from Dayart Stagio's Henry Thurlow that is definitely more focused on details than Verkreek's work was, but his insane attention to detail with art is admirable, especially with Kaido's many scales, and his layouts as Oden gets smashed through a bunch of different rocks on his way down is immensely satisfying, providing a pathway to pass the baton on over to Wano's favorite semi-regular Takashi Kojima, with what is no doubt his best work on the series too, bringing his loose yet detailed artwork and movement to the fray as Oden skates onto and around Kaido like he's a goddamn grinding rail, causing Kaido to fling some deliciously loose effects work his way which slows him down for a bit, all culminating in a satisfying finale to the cut as Oden reaches Kaido and gives him that oh so famous scar with the kanji that Kojima also used back in 961. Then, after all is said and done and Kaido effectively knocks Oden out, we get a pleasantly bouncy and lifelike cut from webgen animator Beast, who's mostly work on Black Clover, as Kiremon gets bonked on the head himself, which leads into the B part of the episode with Chu's mentor Tang Zonghee's cut, featuring both Hiyori and Momonosuke interacting with Toki that just breathes so much life into all of their little movements. Low-key being one of my own personal favorite cuts of this episode as someone with a deep love for character acting. Wrapped up all nicely with an insanely well animated B part of the episode that feels like it simply doesn't have to go as hard as it does in some places, and 972 ends up being quite the well animated and quite the well directed marvel and an absolute achievement for both Chu and Tanaka. It's clear as day that they've both worked incredibly hard on this episode for the past few months on top of their other work on the show, and while there seem to be a few rough patches in the overall production of it, the absolutely strong and never wavering spirits of both of these staff members kept on chugging along to the finish line and did their best to bring us this insanely good and memorable episode that in some places may even challenge that of episodes from 2 years prior. But we'll save that for another day. From the bottom of my heart, I'd like to thank both Chu and Tanaka for their insane and dedicated work that's been put onto screen, and I simply can't wait for more. In the meantime though, next week we're jumping right back to the execution at hand with episode 973 that does look a bit worrying. While I'm sure Satoshi Ito's storyboard will lead to some satisfying direction, visually it's clear where the priority was, and Shingaki's art is a bit on the weaker side of things even for him. However, I'll still be keeping an open mind about it all the same as we head into it, and I don't really think I have a right to complain after the 2 very solid episodes that we just got. Anyways guys, that's it for now. I'm Skippy, and evil Momonosuke is actually quite terrifying.